Social media doesn't create leaders, but it's a vacuum that needs leaders to step up.
We could do this. I don't care what happens. We'll figure this out. If you want to go do something else, do it. There's never a better chance.
My department came into my office, closed the door, and shared with me a few words I'll never forget. He said, "You're fired." And then social exploded. I was in the right place at the right time. When my son was 3 or 4, my wife was driving by the airport, and he pointed at the airport and said, "That's where my dad works."
One of the potential keys, if you want to get to that next level, is to become a student.
That was kind of the seed of this company. Like, oh, what if I create a software that sends emails and in one click, they can schedule out their whole week of social media posts?
For my spouse, I don't know if I would have had the guts to do it.
You are as hungry as you will ever be. Do not waste that. Everything you're going to do in business, it's been done before. There's a model, there's a system, there's a structure and a framework.
Hey, everybody. It's Brandon Ansley. Welcome to Boundary Breakers, where we talk to high achievers, extraordinary individuals, those among us who have overcome significant challenges to make it to the very top of their chosen profession. On today's episode of Boundary Breakers, we sit down with Adrian Dayton.
Hi, I'm Adrian Dayton. Hi, I'm Adrian Dayton. Hi, I'm Adrian Dayton. And I spent the last 5 years helping lawyers all over the world bring in more business with tools like LinkedIn, Twitter, and blogs.
He and I actually have a lot in common. We both started our careers as attorneys, and my conversation with Adrian is really, really, really interesting. We spend some time talking about what it's like to leave a steady job to become an entrepreneur, the risks associated with doing that. And we ask and we answer the question, how do you know whether you have what it takes to become an entrepreneur? And don't forget, you can watch on the Boundary Breakers YouTube channel, or you can listen on all major podcasting platforms. Enjoy. Boundary Breakers is brought to you by Carter & Clark. What I'd like to do is I'd like to just talk briefly, just a minute or two about your background, and then
Sure.
A little bit about law school and your career as an attorney, as a corporate attorney,
Sure.
and then your software company, Clearview Social, and then how you became an expert in the social media side of things.
Yeah, sounds great.
And then some coaching and EOS. Look, you and I actually have a whole lot in common. I'm also a recovering attorney myself.
Nice.
And our paths are not a whole lot different, but this isn't about me, it's about you.
That's all good.
So tell us a little bit about your background. You were born out there in Salt Lake?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born in Los Angeles, and my father was finishing medical school. We moved around a bit and then ended up, when I was 7 in Salt Lake City. So I really grew up in Salt Lake City, next to the mountains. Loved it here. High school, lived in Chile for a couple of years as a missionary for my church. And,
oh, wow.
And then I came back and finished school at BYU, studied economics there. That's really kind of where I think I got like the entrepreneurial bug. And I just realized like at some point I was going to be creating a business. And so I left BYU. And actually the economy, right when I graduated the summer after September 11th happened, 2001. And so, it wasn't as bad as like, say, 2008, 2009, but it was pretty close. Like all the companies that normally came to interview, they canceled the interviews. And so it was kind of this like, well, what am I going to do now? Right? Like my plan was to work for one of these big companies. And so I ended up starting an import company with a cousin. And we put together some good deals. And he had been a missionary. So I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He had been a missionary in Thailand. So he was fluent in Thai and Chinese because he had lived in China for a bit. And so he had all the contacts and I was a great salesman. So we kind of teamed up and put together some great deals. And there's some ups and downs there. And, kind of one thing led to another. I just, I left that business and I realized I needed to find something more stable. And for that to work, I probably needed more education. So I went to law school, not to become a lawyer, but because I thought it could help me open doors for me to be kind of the entrepreneur that I wanted to be,
Absolutely.
And so I got married during law school, had my first son born before law school ended, and then suddenly like entrepreneurship seemed less attractive than like having a job in health insurance, And so I took a job at a big, safe law firm, in Western New York. Oh yeah, by the way, so I went to law school at SUNY Buffalo.
Okay.
And, I had like, summer internship there, got the offer, started, and this is like fall of 2008 that I started. And, I was working on some big deals. I mean, I worked on this like $500 million asset merger deal that anyway, it was like some cool business stuff, but it's kind of funny. Even when I was working on these huge deals, in the back of my head was just the thought like, what would be fun? What would be really fun is if this was my deal, like this was my company, that I was selling or that I was buying, I just like,
Amen.
I just had no interest in like moving these papers around for someone else, and then, so then 2008 ended, 2009 started, and this whole kind of a random series of events that all, led to good things. But I'd written a book about, it was a year to develop 12 virtues in your life. So it was called The Year of 12 Virtues. And I found a publisher and they're like, look, we really like you, but nobody knows you. So like, how could, what can you do to build your profile? And a friend of mine in PR said, look, what you got to do is there's this new site called Twitter. So join Twitter. And so this is like end of 2008. So I get on Twitter and I'm just like, I'm a networker by nature, but right. I'd never like seen something that would just allow me to like make these new friends across the country, across the world instantly. And so I just started to really work Twitter just to build my persona so I could get this book published, right? And I had a soft commitment from them to publish it. They just, I just tried to build my persona, Right. And then one day somebody on Twitter asked the question, they're like, hey, does anybody know a contracts lawyer? Right? Like that's the work I was doing. And I responded, I was like, hey, yeah, like that's what I do. And I brought in a new client to my firm, right? My first client as a newly minted lawyer.
Right. Big deal.
And then the wheels started turning like, wait, they just asked, does anyone know a contracts lawyer? And Twitter is completely open and searchable. Anybody could have been searching for that query and responded. I was the only person that responded. So I realized there was a dissymmetry in information here. And I thought, lawyers have no idea the power here. And right when like the wheels were turning, like this could be something, the head of my department came into my office, closed the door and shared with me a few words I'll never forget. He said, "You're fired." And I called my wife and, we had, a baby at home, student debt, like timing was not great. And, so my wife she was emotional, right? She was in tears. And I was like, it's okay, honey. I've got an idea. I'm going to start a business teaching lawyers how to use Twitter. And she just cried harder, but no, she was supportive. But it was interesting is I had this idea, but then this other job opportunity came along. Within a week of me losing my job, I had another job offer at this up and coming startup. And literally like I had verbally accepted this job offer and I was driving with my wife. I still remember this moment. And I was like, it's going to be a great job for the family because I'm going to get health insurance. They're going to give me a cell phone, a laptop, a projector. And she's like, projector? And then she called me. She's like, are you trying to sell me on you taking the job? Or are you trying to convince yourself? And she said, look, if you have something else you want to do, like you have my full support. And I just read Seth Godin's book, Tribes, right? And it's a book that's not really about social media. It's really about leadership, how like social media doesn't create leaders, but it's a vacuum that needs leaders to step up. And I just realized like, I could be the guy, like I could be the leader in this industry that's very risk averse. You talk about boundary breakers. I mean, the first dozen lawyers, I said, I'm going to bring social media to lawyers. They said, that's stupid. That's never going to work. The only lawyers that want to use social media are already using it. Right. And ironically at this time, right, when they were telling me this, Twitter had 10 million users globally. Right.
Gosh. So
I got in like literally like, I was in the first 1% of social media's growth. And I wrote the first book one of the first books on social media for professionals. and then social exploded. I was in the right place at the right time. And so I was traveling all over the country, all over the world. You actually can't see it. There's a map on the wall here, and it has pins, all the places I gave talks about social media.
Oh, that's cool.
And so in addition to 40 or 50 talks around the United States that I gave, I gave talks in Rome, Italy, in Taipei, Taiwan, in Sydney, in Melbourne, Australia, in Wellington, New Zealand. And anyway, I mean, I just had this adventure, right? Like traveling all over the world. I took my family with me on these international trips. Like I had a goal to live in a foreign country for a month with my family each year. And we just did it, and we just had one kid at the time. We have 3 now, but then when my son was 3 or 4, my wife was driving by the airport and he pointed at the airport and said, "That's where my dad works," And that's when I kind of realized I'm probably traveling too much. But more than that, from the very beginning, right? I kind of had this, it's like this guru model, right? Like if you're the guru, you can get a premium for your time, but you're still just trading your time for money, right? So I was like, even though most of my services averaged out that I was making over $1,000 an hour, it's like, it was never going to be more than that,
Yeah.
And so I thought I got to find a way to create recurring revenue from all these same firms. Like they all want help with this. They all want to be better with social media. And there's only so much you can do with a speech, right? Or, I had some coaching programs. They were a little bit more successful for the people that really dove in. And so anyway, but then actually had a SaaS company try to hire me to help bring their product to the legal industry, but they wanted to give me a tiny sliver of equity, and they wanted me to give up my book of business, which is I was making phenomenal money, right? There's just it was
was it a social media company as well? Was it a social media company?
Yeah, it actually was. Yeah. The company is actually called People Links, and they'd taken a big check, Series A check from. I guess it was a big seed check, but anyway, they'd taken a big check. And I think they're still around in some form, but it's I definitely dodged a bullet not joining them. But I flew out to their offices in Philly, and it was it looked like something out of the TV show Silicon Valley, right? They had the beanbag chairs and the foosball table and the snack room, all that stuff. And even though I wasn't sold on their company, I was I'm at least as smart or smarter than the guys that started this. And so I really was inspired, I can do this,
That's awesome.
And so
That's
cool. I wasn't able to convince anyone to write me a check for $4 or $5 million. However, I was able to raise a couple $1 million over the first 2 years, mostly self-funding at first and just kind of bootstrapping and then raising a little bit of money. I was able to get a match for my first $500,000 raised from New York State. It's this fund where they get the same ownership stake as whoever invests in you, right? So you could screw them, but then you'd be screwing your friends and family, right? Who's also investing, right? But anyway, so
the incentives are aligned. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, and I was off and running, and within the first couple of years, I step back. The idea came from this. I'd worked with these groups of high-performing lawyers at top firms, top 100 firms. And they would all learn how to create a blog and use social media to promote it, really just to not really to promote the blog or to promote them, but just to share useful information, right? So that they would have more exposure. Yep. And a small handful of them really dove in and, were just rock stars, right? I had lawyers that brought in multi-million-dollar pieces of litigation, big matters through this work. But most of them just wanted to participate in social media. They just wanted to share good information from the firm, but they were it was technically too difficult for them to figure out how to schedule their posts, find the links, and do this all at the right time, right? And one day, one of the people in the group is could the firm send out a digest of everything for us to share, And that was kind of the seed of this company. What if I created a software that sends emails and in one click they can schedule out their whole week of social media posts. So we had like a share all button, there's this whole list. They can pick and choose or hit share all, and their next, 2 weeks will be scheduled out for them. So that's Clearview Social. And so, anyway, so I'm kind of like, and then I built that company up, and, we grew it for about 8 years and sold it about 2 years ago. So that's kind of my story.
Yeah. Well, look, that's amazing. And I was trying hard not to jump in there because, look, I can relate. From 2005 to 2009, I practiced at King and Spalding in Atlanta.
Oh, that's amazing! Firm. In 2012, I was at King and Spalding in DC teaching them LinkedIn. So,
well, I was just about to say, I could specifically remember early on in my career, like 08, 09, this social media thing being, the buzzword, right? Like, people talking about this, talking about Facebook, and I think MySpace was still around.
Yeah.
And look, tons of credit to you, because it did not occur to me even a little bit that social media would be, a business development tool. I thought it was, something that the younger generation was sort of, messing around with to have fun, like a video game. So look, shows you what I knew. But looking back, brilliant idea, obviously, right?
Thank you.
Proof's of the pudding. But I can imagine that you had some early clients that really grabbed a hold of it and have built a career off of it, right?
Yeah. What's interesting is there were these firms that were like early adopters, like firms like Foley Hoag in Boston or Dorsey and Whitney in Minneapolis. And they were willing to like lean into this new technology that was untested. And they just said like, who knows what's going to happen? Let's give it a try, And then you had much more conservative firms like King and Spalding that they waited on the sidelines until there was a lot of evidence that, hey, business is getting done here and you're not part of it. And to their credit, they jumped on board. There's a handful of firms, big firms that you would recognize the name of that still aren't really using social media, but
really,
but anyway, at a corporate level, they're using it, but they're not, like I say, like giving fire to the natives, right? They're not like letting their, embracing it, as, culturally letting their lawyers jump in. Sorry. Anyway, but I digress. I could talk about this, all day, but yeah.
No, I think it's great. I love it. Well, so in addition to Clearview, did you also help or coach attorneys sort of on an individual level? Did people come to you and say, "Teach me how to do this"?
Yeah. So part one in my kind of entrepreneurial journey was when I lost my job. I wrote the book, right? Like I was the guy for social media, and at first I thought of coaching individuals, but I realized very quickly that the sales effort required to find one client was excessive, right? Like most individuals wanted, 2 or 3 conversations before they were convinced.
Yeah.
However, if I went to a big law firm, I could easily say, hey, do you guys have a group of 10 to 15 rising stars you'd like me to coach? And so I would do group coaching. There'd still be a one-on-one component, but right, like I was selling a deal that was like a $6,000 a month retainer instead of, ones and twos,
Yeah.
And
just
so,
harder to scale.
So probably like the best advice I ever got was to laser focus on one type of firm, because my first year I was all over the place. I was like putting on boot camps, right, where I would go speak to big groups for free, and then they could buy a ticket to the boot camp to get the really good stuff. And there is way too many moving parts, right? Whereas once I got these kind of groups where, you think about it, it's like if a firm is paying $6,000 to $10,000 a month for you to work with a group, you don't need very many of those to make good money, So
yeah. Well, so compare and contrast your time practicing law to try to build a business. Obviously, it sounds like you liked the entrepreneurial world a lot better.
Oh yeah, like just on its face, practicing law, it requires a huge amount of intelligence and very little in the way of social skills. Like you can be very successful. Like you could be a corporate lawyer that's literally a robot. You can be very successful with no social skills, right?
Agreed.
I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, wonderful guy, but head of my corporate department, my first job, you know, I remember I'm just like a networker. So I wanted to get to know all the partners. He was my direct boss. So in the first couple of weeks, I walked into his office like, hey, wonder if maybe we could grab lunch sometime, you know? And he looks at me and he says, I bring my lunch. And the conversation was like over, right? It's like, he could have said like, I bring my lunch, bring a lunch in and we'll sit have lunch together, right? Like the purpose wasn't feeding me, right? Like, but that's the thing is like, I mean, he's a brilliant lawyer, right? But it's just like, we're very different people, you know?
Right.
And, and so the sitting in front of a computer screen, not having social interaction being my primary job, like that was never going to work for me, right? Like I should have realized that before I took the job, you know? And people always say like, oh, you lost your job and you turned like a negative into a positive. And it's like, well, I hated the job. So I turned a positive into a positive. Like I got to leave and I got to find something I love. But not only that, I mean, look, I about starved for my first 6 months after getting laid off when I was building my thing. But after those first 6 months, I never had a year when I made less, you know, when I made less than double of what I made that first year as a lawyer. I mean, so, you know, like financially, once I was in control of my own destiny, it was extremely motivating. I mean, I think my wife was like, she was almost like shocked. Like I was hoping my husband was a hard worker, but like I'd never seen him like work with this intensity until it was like unpaid building my own thing, you know?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I have been there. Look, that in and of itself, I think is a really interesting and important point to bring up. You know, I was there too, right? I left a very comfortable, stable job, right? I mean, the practice of law, if nothing else, is certainly, you know, you get a paycheck, it's stable, you have health insurance, you know it's going to be there.
Spalding, I mean, that is like an elite firm. That is like a, you know, like that's a firm you could land at and work your way to become partner and be on the partner track making $1 million plus a year, right? Like, like it's a path that has a clear, right? Like a clear finish line with great potential, right? I mean, it says a lot just that you're able to get hired there, you know, that's awesome.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. But the best man at my wedding, great guy. He's still there. Made equity partner. It doing very, very well. But the point that I was going to make was that my wife was also, you know, she looked at me very similarly to yours and said, listen, look, I got your back. We could do this. I don't care what happens. We'll figure this out. If you want to go do something else, do it. There's never a better chance. It was before we had kids, but, and so I don't know, Adrian, without that support from my spouse, I don't know if I would have had the guts to do it. And it sounds like you also have a very, very, very supportive spouse. Do you think that plays a pretty significant role in your success?
1,000%. I mean, I can't imagine, you know, I have a great marriage. I hit the jackpot with the wife that I married. You know, and some people say they feel trapped in their marriage, but imagine you have a spouse that's forcing you to do a job every day that you don't like, right? I mean, I think any spouse though that really cares about their husband's happiness is going to want them to find something that, you know, makes them feel alive. And I mean, I just think she was so happy for me that I found something that really gave me so much energy.
Yeah, I love that. That's fantastic. Well, so if you were talking to your younger self, right, in those first 6 months or first 12 months, right, you're talking to somebody who, you know, they're at that same place with their idea at the moment.
Yeah.
And they may be frustrated or doubtful or unsure. You know, what would you tell them as they were trying to bootstrap?
Yeah. So the greatest perspective that I have now that I wish I had then was, you are as hungry as you will ever be. Like, do not waste that. Like, do not waste that desire and passion. And I don't think I did, but I also think I didn't realize how special that was. You know, I mean, you know, I went with on a ski trip with a bunch of entrepreneurs that had sold their business. And this was just months after selling my software company. And I said to them, I said, how do you get back that hunger, that drive to build and succeed at your first business? And everyone just kind of rolled their eyes, it's hard. That's hard to find. It's special, And so when I see hungry entrepreneurs, right, that's one thing that I tell them is it's that feeling that you can do anything is you got to lean into that.
Absolutely. That's awesome. I could not agree more. I think you'd probably have to roll back the clock in order for me to get that energy back. But I was younger for sure. But yeah, it is the moment at which somebody has an idea, there's that glimmer of hope, and they think, I think I may be able to build something out of this. That's magical. And I think you're exactly right. Don't waste that, right? Because billing hours will beat that out of you.
Yeah.
After only a few years. So
yeah,
I think that is amazing. Well, so on the social media side, a lot has changed, I guess, since the advent of Twitter, with all this AI stuff and all the new technology. Do you see there being a huge shift coming up in the technology, especially as it relates to marketing for lawyers and things like that?
Yeah, let's
not that you have a crystal ball.
Yeah, well, but let's be very honest about one thing, and that is there is and has always been a lot of noise on social media, right? And some people use the term there's a lot of noise, not a lot of signal. People that use social media well figure out how to find what they're looking for and can really hone in on great content and great information, right? As that's the single best strategy for social media is just produce great content that helps people and you'll be successful, right? That's one of the big messages that I was sharing for over a decade. What I think AI does is it allows us to create just way more noise that is higher quality noise than before. But I still think the vast majority of the time, it's just going to fall short because it's missing the human element. It's missing the personality. It's missing the story. It's missing the humor. And look, it is kind of funny though, in 2009, I was the one telling all of the old timers, right? The grumpy old men that were get off my lawn, that no, social media, you have to pay attention to it. And I think a lot of the kind of AI pundits now, when I say it will never be on the same level, right? They're oh, just wait. But I just think there's something about the human touch that's still gonna set, real personable communication apart.
Interesting. Are the attorneys that are on that platform that use it with the most success, are they developing are they sharing content of their specialized area of expertise, or are they just building a personal brand, or are they just active? What's the key to success, at least in that arena?
So professionals using social media, there's really kind of two tried and tested strategies. And it's very rare that someone does both just because there's not enough time. So, and I refer to these as the hunting and the fishing strategy. So the hunting strategy is, you create a target list of 100 of the most high value relationships you can target that need exactly what you provide. And you find them and you quote unquote stalk them on LinkedIn. You create a relationship, you send them content to add value, and you build those relationships until you can meet them in person and bring in that business, right? I've met hundreds of rainmakers all over the country. All of them, whether they use social media or not, they have some version of that hunting strategy. They have a list and they work that list, The other strategy is more of and I apologize, the Boy Scout analogies, but it's more of a fishing strategy, which is if you have a very specific vertical and a very specific specialty, put out there great education, great information, great knowledge about what you know and what you do. And you're going to hook people, right? They're going to do a search and like, oh, this is who I need. So, one of the lawyers I worked with, he was actually a Watergate prosecutor. So he's getting a little older, but he loved Twitter. And he had a website that was all about computer fraud. So there's a lesser known legislation about the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. And he became the expert on that. So when a company had somebody steal, right, like steal information from them or commit computer fraud against their own company before they left or whatever, they would do a search and his blog came up because he had been writing about this for 15 years, right? Like when you search for computer fraud, I don't know now, it's probably different because he's not as active, but when you search for computer fraud on Google, number one was the Wikipedia entry and number two was, Nick Ackerman's site.
Oh, wow.
And so he had multi-million-dollar piece of litigation that came into him as cold calls through his website because, right, it's like he had all of the like online real estate there, And he didn't, and the crazy thing, he didn't use any SEO or pay-per-click. He just created great content, right?
All organically. Wow.
Right.
Wow.
So those I think are, like my two favorite strategies. There's things you can do like buying LinkedIn ads and other things that are more marketing than sales. But, the hunting and fishing strategy, anybody can do that with no money, So, I mean, those are the two that I really, I encourage people if it was a fit, right? Some people's personality, they're just never going to be hunters, right?
Right.
But, anyone that likes to write can be a fisherman. They're like, what if I don't like to talk to people or don't like to write? And it's like, well, it's probably not going to be good.
I want to find something else, right? That's funny. Are you still involved with Clearview Social or have you moved on totally?
I'm still an advisor and I'm still rooting for their success. And
sure, absolutely.
In the venture, basically the company that purchased them, they said, look, you can take all cash or you can leave some of it in the fund, and it's a roll-up strategy. So every few years they have a recap event, a capitalization event, and you're able to get a big cash out. So, I mean, I would say I'm more committed to the fund than I am to Clearview because I want the fund to do well because I have a big investment there, but
gotcha.
I'm not involved in the work. And an interesting thing happened just before COVID. Actually, my wife kind of made it clear to me that she was done with me traveling all the time. Right.
Oh, really? Okay.
I mean, just, we have 3 kids and it had been hard on her, and I kind of dug in to really like figure out, she didn't say it to me. I actually like more asked her questions. And once I understood the true impact it had on her and the family of me being gone, I just kind of decided, and this is before, the company was even, for sale, or under LOI or whatever. I just decided I wasn't going to travel as much. And then ironically, like 4 months later, COVID hit, right?
Oh, wow.
And no one was traveling for 2 years.
Yeah.
And before COVID ended, I sold my business. And so actually during COVID also, well, a year before COVID, I started coaching companies as a volunteer for the EO Accelerator.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because it was just 1 day a month for a half day, but I just loved it. And after 6-7 months of doing it, I just realized like, wow, my favorite day each month is this day that I'm helping these companies like avoid the landmines that I, maybe stepped on when I was building my business. Right. And then after that first year, my group that I was coaching did so well, the organization asked me to chair the whole organization for the state. So the kind of EO board. And I chaired that accelerator for 3 years. And the last of which was when I stepped down. So just over a year ago, June, I stepped down from Clearview Social as a CEO. They found a replacement and because I wanted them to. And I'm sure they would have been happy for me to stay around. And I just had to like do some soul searching, like, what do I really love? And I realized like, well, like the volunteer work I do, coaching these companies, helping them get to the $1 million mark in annual revenue, I just loved. And so I asked, how could I do that every day? And I had used EOS and the structure that Gino Wickman created with the book Traction. And so I went and got certified. And yeah, so now I'm, I guess, just 13 months in of being an EOS implementer. And and the reason I mentioned all the travel at the beginning is because I only work locally. Like I only like companies can fly in here. They could hire me and work virtually with me if they want, but I only work locally. So ironically, I don't use social media very much for my marketing because I have this huge national audience, and I don't really want to get hired outside, right? Like I want to have dinner with my family every night, you know? And so it's a different phase of my life. And, you know, I love travel. I love business travel. There's probably another software company in my future, but right now I'm just loving like being home, being present, and doing this great work with local companies.
Yeah. No, I love that too. Look, I was talking with my wife just the other night. Look, I mean, there are seasons to life, right? You know, you had a season, it sounds like, where, you know, you were burning at both ends there for a long time building your business. And it sounds like you're going to enjoy a season now. You know, who knows how long it will be where you're a little bit closer to home. Look, I've got 5 kids too, so I know exactly how it feels to want to, you know, be there for the kids and for the wife. But look, I want to talk about EOS a little bit. So another commonality, I use EOS here at my business, and used it in my prior one as well, and love it. But so what is it about EOS that attracted you to it, or you know, what do you like about it, I guess?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think there's a lot of books that provide business strategy, right? Like Good to Great, or, I mean, I read all the business books, right? I mean, and there's lots of books I haven't read too, but I mean, I just was a business book junkie. But someone handed me the book Traction at some conference, and it was kicking around in my bag. And then one flight, you know, I got on this long flight. I think I was going from like Buffalo out to California, and I opened it up. And as I started reading it, I kept stopping and taking notes. And like the person next to me is like, you know, like, what's the, you know, I was just like so excited about everything I was reading. And, you know, I read the book cover to cover in that one flight. And not only was there strategy and structure, but there were tools, right? Like, you know, the scorecard, the level 10 meeting, the people analyzer. I mean, this is stuff, especially the scorecard and the level 10 meeting, just those two things like transformed my business. And it was interesting because, you know, it helped me so much that, you know, the 3 years I was running this accelerator, even though it's not part of the curriculum to use Traction, they actually use Scaling Up by Vern Harnish, which is great, but it's more strategy than, you know, there's not tools in it, not really. And I'd given everyone that went through my accelerator a free copy of Traction just as a gift because I just love it. And so, right, like you really have to be sold on anything you're going to sell. And so I love this, I love the simplicity. I love the structure. But then from the point of view of like a job, you know, I don't like to work every day. Like,
who does, right?
I know most people don't, but like I had designed a life, even the last couple of years running my SaaS company, like I didn't work on Fridays. Like I blocked out those days. I mean, if I needed to take a meeting, I would, but you know, like I just didn't work on Fridays. And so I didn't want to jump into something that was like, I was like starting over again. And so the cool thing with EOS is, you know, and this is actually my session room. So I have a big conference room here with 2 giant whiteboards. So,
nice.
So I bring the groups into this space that's just off the interstate near Salt Lake. And we could have like this transformative experience, right? They walk in the door and with all these worries, and they come out with enthusiasm and passion. And so it's almost like every day I have a session is like a sprint. I'm just working my butt off to like create a great experience for these teams that come and meet with me. But then when it's done, I don't really have homework, right? Like I get to go home and have dinner, and I'm not like, you know, losing sleep like I was over my software company. So it's a really good fit for where I am. But, you know, like I think I still have a hunger to build something else again. But, you know, I love the hero's journey. You're familiar with the hero's journey,
Absolutely.
right? So
Yep.
I'm sure you would be. But just this idea of, like going into the underworld and like going to a place of being safe and things being easy to things being hard and impossible. And then like the guide helps you out, and then you emerge stronger. And it's like, I think after selling my SaaS company, I was a little bit exhausted of the hero's journey. And I was like, I'm going to take a beat and be the guide for a while. And it's been super fun, right? So it's been super fun.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. You mentioned the hero's journey and being the guide. There's a fantastic book out there. You may have read it called Story Brand.
I love Donald Miller. Yeah. Have you read his book, A Million Miles in 1,000 Years?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so that's like his story. Anyway, I highly recommend it. Yeah.
Right.
So
1,000,
and it tells the story of kind of how he was inspired to create Story Brand. Anyway, 1,000 miles, A Million Miles in 1,000 Years.
A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. Got it.
Yeah. Anyway, it's outstanding.
I mean, I'm a big believer that in the that you've got to have a compelling story.
Yes.
And in the structure that he provides with the guide, and how he flips the hero isn't the person that's out there selling. The hero is the person that's being sold to, which sounds like you obviously get very well. And look, I love EOS personally. I think, and I tell young entrepreneurs that, look, that if I could boil it down into a sentence or two in terms of what it's like being an entrepreneur or CEO, it's a constant battle between, looking at the list of things that you need to do, and that you need to accomplish to push the business forward, versus the mountain of things that come at you every day, like the fires, right? And so It's a constant battle between, look, I know I got to do this over here, but I've got all these fires. And EOS is the best model, structure, system, anything that I've found that keeps you focused on what
matters most. Yeah,
exactly. But I'm curious, as an entrepreneur yourself, what it would be like, and what it has been like for you to coach these folks that are sitting in the seat that you were, a decade ago. Is it invigorating? Is it, are you like, oh gosh? So tell me about that.
Yeah. So what's interesting about it is, and this is the biggest feeling I had in the accelerator, is, these are so to qualify for the EO Accelerator, you have to have done over $250,000 in the last 12 months. So these are all companies that they already have a product, right? They already have clients. They're just doing everything themselves, or they have one or two employees, Yeah. And so to help them figure out how to go from being almost like self-employed to leading a team, right? Like making that leap, like it is so powerful. And if you've already been down that road, like it is so easy, right? And so it was just so rewarding to like give them these keys to unlock their business's success and to make such a huge impact. I mean, it was definitely more rewarding that I got to help these companies get to $1 million a year, and I got paid nothing for it, because it just wasn't that much work. It was just fun, right? And I had companies that came through and I told them what to do and they didn't follow my advice, and then they didn't grow. But the ones that just were hungry and grabbed on, were just like a rocket ship. And that was just so much fun. And so now it's interesting because I would say half the companies I'm currently working with are bigger than I ever got with my software company.
Really?
Right. So it's like, I have a lot of clients they're really big companies,
Wow.
I mean, I have a company with over 100 employees, right? And, we didn't have half that many employees at Clarity Social. And, but the truth is, most people that are CEOs are not students of business, right? And I mean, when I launched my first consulting business, not even the software business, but I was just so hungry to learn everything I could. I read all the books. I went to the conferences. I just devoured it. It was just a sponge. And it was fun for me, right? Like, and I've continued that habit even after, right? Like I didn't need that. And so, some people, they're in a family-owned business and they suddenly find themselves running a $10 million a year company. And it's just like, how do we get here? And so the lessons that I learned, look, my business, I mean, if I had a bigger TAM, right, total addressable market, like I have no doubt I could have grown my business to 10 times the size I did. It was a great outcome and I don't regret it at all. Like I met with this VC once and he's like, after I'd sold the company, he's like, yep, looks like you should have picked a different industry. I was like, no, like this was my industry. This was my opportunity. Like it was easy for me to build a business in that industry. If I had gone into a bigger market, there would have been way more competition. I would have needed way more money, right? Like I don't have regrets, but I feel like I see very clearly where companies need to go, and it's really fun just to help guide them through that.
Yeah, that's amazing. It sounds very rewarding, but it's interesting. You said most CEOs are not students of business. And I had to think about that one for a minute, and I agree. And, we mentioned earlier that this podcast is Boundary Breakers, right? And it is meant for those that maybe haven't made that leap yet, but really want to, or that don't know if they want to, but think that they might, but they don't know how.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'd love for you to just a couple more thoughts on that. Right. So sometimes CEOs are not students, but it sounds to me like one of the potential keys, if you want to be, if you want to get to that next level, is to become a student of business. I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I would say is, returning to the hero's journey, because I love so many of the themes to there of them, right? One of like the first parts of the hero's journey is the call to adventure, right? Like you remember, one of my favorite books, right, is Lord of the Rings, right? Gandalf comes to Bilbo, it's just like Frodo. Sorry, Bilbo was in The Hobbit anyway, and he's just like, "Hey, you got to come. Like, we need your help. This is like a big deal. It's going to be this amazing adventure." And and he says no, and he leaves, and it's like. But the call to adventure, I mean, the way that you're meant to be an entrepreneur is that call to adventure comes and it will not be quiet until you take action. If you're satisfied to just go bill by the hour and you think, maybe I could start a business, like you're not an entrepreneur, right? It's the people that cannot, right? It's like the telltale heart, and that just keeps beating and driving you crazy until you go make a decision. I mean, some people say like, oh, you had this misfortune of losing your job and how nice you ended up being an entrepreneur. And it's like, I was always going to be an entrepreneur, right? Like this is just how it happened, Yeah. I'm so glad it did.
Oh, I agree. Gosh, I mean, I have said that so many times myself. I use the analogy sometimes. It's like a dog that has a string tied to his tail with an empty like beer can on the end of the string. It can't figure out what's going on, but can't turn it off. The call to adventure. I think that's really insightful. I do. I think that's extremely insightful and a really interesting test for people who don't know if they're meant to be an entrepreneur. If it doesn't turn off. But yeah, so speaking of the hero's journey and all that, I see that you climbed Kilimanjaro, right?
Yeah. My wife and I actually, it's been a while since we've done a summit, but we used to be, it's so funny, we used to live at sea level, in Buffalo, New York. And we would fly out and do these cool adventures with my father-in-law. And now we live in the mountains in Salt Lake City. And so the mountains are here, but yeah, so we climbed Kilimanjaro and we've done Mount Rainier. And,
nice.
I think once things settle down in Russia, we'd like to go to Mount Elbrus there. But anyway, so it has some more peaks in us.
Cool.
But you know, and I am not a go hiking every weekend person. I'm a person that like sets a goal and then trains for that goal and accomplishes it. And that, you know, those mountains have been like the marathons I've run, and then I've run with my wife. Like, I love setting these big goals. I have ADHD, and so I like need a goal and something novel to motivate me. So that's
to
how
stay focused.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you a hiker too?
I'm not.
Yeah.
But I do have ADHD, and I do need to set goals.
Yeah.
I was just taking a mental note that I need to figure it out. I need to go on an adventure to Kilimanjaro, or I've had a buddy of mine did Everest, but I think that's a little bit extreme.
Yeah, but like honestly, Kilimanjaro, anybody in above average health can climb it, because it's just a walk. It's just a long walk, you know? Yeah.
So is that similar to it? It almost seems like that's sort of a microcosm of what it's like to be an entrepreneur, right? I mean, can we summit this mountain?
Like, you just have to keep going. Now, the thing about entrepreneurship is, and this is what I love about like EOS too with entrepreneurship, is everything you're going to do in business, it's been done before. There's a model, there's a system, there's a structure and a framework. The two things though that can't be replicated is do you have the right product and do you have the right market, right? And so if you have the right product and you have the right market, anybody can be a successful entrepreneur, right? But if you don't have those two things, right, then it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what structure or framework you use, right? Like you've got, you know, but that's the risk of becoming an entrepreneur, right? Like, not every entrepreneur succeeds, right? I mean, I don't know what the odds are, but I think the majority fail and have to go back to work at a job, you know? But I kind of like this analogy of there's this rushing river, right? And on one side are all the people working in jobs that wish they could be entrepreneurs. And on the other side of the river, there's like this beautiful field of grass, and all the entrepreneurs are there like enjoying their life. And the people with jobs like are looking across there, and they'd love to be there, but they don't know if they're willing to cross the river to get there, right? And it's like, but the true entrepreneurs have the hunger where it's like, they would rather the river take them than to lose the chance, you know, to gain the freedom of entrepreneurship.
Like, I love that. It's like, I don't care if I drown. It's better than being over here with all these other people. Yeah.
Right.
I got you. Well, listen, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you've got to jump. So just one last question. It's a question that I like to ask everybody. So, I mean, God willing, this doesn't happen. So forgive me, it's just an analogy. But so, if your office there caught on fire, and you had just a moment to run back in and grab one thing that you could save, what would you save?
Yeah, that's an easy question. So I have a picture right here. Actually, I'll pull it off. I have a picture of me fishing with my son when he was just like 3 years old in Seneca Lake, which is just near Buffalo, New York. And, you know, everything else here, just I could let.
I got it. Great answer. I love it. That looks like a Hallmark card or something.
I didn't even know my friend Lainey took the picture. I didn't even know she took it until she sent us the picture. And then my wife had it mounted for me. But anyway, so.
Well, that shows you where your priorities are, man. I love it. And look, I genuinely appreciate you taking an hour with me. I've learned a lot. A very impressive background, and I wish you the best. I'll shoot you a note and stay in touch.
Thanks so much, Brandon. I love the conversation. I'd love to chat another time where I can learn more about what you're doing, you know.
I would love to. It'd be my honor. All right, Adrian, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You too. Cheers.
Don't forget, everybody, you can find Boundary Breakers in a lot of places. You can watch our episodes on the Boundary Breakers YouTube channel, or you can listen to each podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any of the other major podcasting platforms. Thanks for listening.